Well, I think when you go out with someone for quite a long time, you do get to know each other very, very well. You go through the good times, you go through the bad times, both personally, but also within a relationship as well. And, I think if you can come out of that stronger.
What if the most powerful secret in royal history was about to be uncovered? A routine DNA test, one Catherine never expected to define her life, would reveal a truth so explosive it would shatter the monarchy itself. As the results unfold, Catherine faces a devastating choice: keep the truth buried or expose a legacy of betrayal that could destroy everything. Diana's final secret is about to be exposed, and with it, the royal family's darkest hour.
We also need to talk about its stresses and strains. It's okay not to find it easy. And asking for help should not be seen as a sign of weakness. If any of us caught a fever during pregnancy, we would seek advice and support from a doctor. Getting help with our mental health is no different. Our children need us.
Brace yourself for a revelation that will change everything you thought you knew about the crown. It began as a routine medical examination, something Catherine thought she had prepared for. Behind the closed doors of the palace's medical wing, the procedure seemed like any other she had undergone before. The royal family, known for its penchant for discreetness when it came to health matters, had always managed to keep such things under wraps. Catherine had been advised to take part in a regular medical checkup, a simple precaution that was meant to ensure her well-being. For her, it was nothing more than a formality, something that went unnoticed in the broader scope of her duties. However, what seemed to be an innocuous test soon turned into something far more significant. Catherine was instructed to undergo a routine blood test, but when the doctor added a line in her paperwork, the unease started to settle in. A DNA confirmation was required, and that simple sentence struck a chord in Catherine's mind. It wasn't that DNA tests were unusual. They were, after all, a standard practice in medicine. But the wording, clinical and impersonal, felt off. It didn't match the usual tone of such documents. And the moment she read it, something within her shifted. Catherine had always been one to trust her instincts. And in this moment, they screamed at her that there was more to this than what appeared on the surface. She asked the doctors, in her usual calm manner, why DNA was necessary now. It was a gentle inquiry, but she could sense the subtle discomfort in their responses. At first, they reassured her that it was just a formality, part of a broader health check. But their eyes, those eyes that avoided hers for just a split second, betrayed their words. The tension in the room was palpable. Catherine noticed the slight exchange of glances between the doctors, the brief hesitation before they answered her questions. It was a subtle but significant moment, and for Catherine, it was the first clue that something more was happening. The hush in the air felt like a physical presence, heavy and oppressive. The walls seemed to close in around her, almost as if they too were aware of the secrets being kept. She tried to shake off the feeling, but it persisted, gnawing at her. As the blood sample was taken and sealed with extra care, Catherine watched as the medical staff handled it with a level of secrecy that seemed unnecessary. It was taken under strict confidentiality, the usual procedure for royal matters. But there was an underlying urgency in the way it was handled. The sealed sample was double-checked, carried away like something precious, something that needed to be protected at all costs. Catherine couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just a patient at this moment. There was more at play, and she had become an unwilling participant. The thought that had been at the back of her mind now surged forward, uninvited. Could this be about Diana? The possibility that it lingered in her mind, dark and unsettling. Catherine had spent years living in the shadow of Diana's legacy, a legacy that defined not just her marriage to William, but her role within the royal family. Diana had been a figure of immense public fascination, a woman whose life had been filled with both brilliance and tragedy. And though Diana had been gone for many years, her memory remained a powerful force within the palace. Catherine had always felt connected to her, not just because of her marriage to William, but because of the similarities they shared. Both women were expected to live up to the demands of the crown, to perform in public, to smile through the most difficult moments. It was a role neither of them had asked for, yet both were forced to endure. But this was different. For the first time, it seemed that Diana's shadow was reaching out beyond the grave and demanding attention. The sealed blood sample, the secrecy surrounding it, the unease from the doctors. It all felt too orchestrated to be a mere coincidence. Catherine had long been aware of the whispers that surrounded Diana's life, the rumors about her marriage, her fears, her struggles. She had seen the photographs, heard the interviews, and read the letters that had surfaced after Diana's death. All of those pieces, once scattered and seemingly disconnected, were now starting to fit together in ways that Catherine had never expected. As the days passed, the unsettling feeling did not leave her. Instead, it grew. The whispers around the palace grew louder, not from officials or those in power, but from the staff who worked behind the scenes. Catherine overheard murmurs about the DNA test, whispers about how it might not even be about her at all. Rumors began to circulate that the test was designed not to confirm her own identity, but to tie her bloodline back to Diana's. It was said that the late princess herself had once hinted at something, but had never fully exposed it. This revelation was, according to the rumors, something that Diana had concealed in life, something the monarchy had known but had kept hidden, waiting for the right moment to surface. The thought was disturbing, almost too much to consider. But Catherine couldn't ignore it. What if this DNA test was the key to uncovering what Diana had hidden for so long? What if this test, this seemingly innocent medical procedure, was the monarchy's way of finally revealing the truth, a truth that had been buried for years? The question gnawed at her, a constant presence in the back of her mind. The night before the results were due, Catherine could hardly sleep. She found herself walking the halls of Kensington Palace, the silence of the night amplifying the thoughts racing through her mind. Each step echoed through the empty corridors, and for a moment, it felt as though she was walking alongside Diana herself. It was a strange thought, one that Catherine quickly pushed away as irrational. But deep down, she couldn't escape the feeling that Diana's presence, her spirit, was still very much alive, still very much a part of the world Catherine now inhabited. Her thoughts were heavy with the weight of the unknown. If this test was truly about revealing something hidden, something tied to Diana's legacy, then what would it mean for Catherine? What would it mean for the monarchy? Catherine's thoughts were interrupted only by the arrival of the sealed envelope containing the results, and she knew, in that moment, that nothing would ever be the same again. When the sealed envelope arrived, Catherine felt her heart race. She had been anticipating this moment for days, and yet when it finally came, she found herself paralyzed by fear. The envelope was small, unassuming, but the weight of it seemed to press down on her like an unbearable burden. This wasn't just any ordinary piece of paper. This was the moment that would define her future, the moment that would force her to confront the deepest, darkest secrets of the royal family. With trembling hands, she carefully broke the seal, her mind racing with the possibilities. The results, she knew, could change everything. They could reveal truths that had been buried for years, secrets that had been hidden from the public eye for decades. The air around her felt thick with tension, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though the world had paused. Catherine unfolded the paper slowly, the sharp clinical language on the page jumping out at her. She tried to focus on the words, but her mind kept drifting back to the rumors she had overheard. Was this it? Was this the secret that had been whispered about for so long? Her eyes scanned the text, and as she read, a sense of dread washed over her. The results confirmed everything she had feared. It wasn't just about her. It was about Diana. The DNA test had revealed something far more explosive than anyone had anticipated. There, in black and white, was the proof that Catherine had been dreading. The bloodline, it seemed, could be traced back to Diana in ways that no one had ever imagined. the test wasn't just about confirming Catherine's identity or lineage. It was about revealing a connection that had been hidden for years, a connection that could shake the foundations of the monarchy itself. Catherine's hands shook as she absorbed the information. She remembered the stories William had shared with her over the years about his mother. He had spoken of her loneliness, the years of isolation she had endured within the palace walls. Catherine had always known that Diana's life had been far from perfect, but seeing it laid out so starkly in front of her was different. It was one thing to hear about Diana's struggles secondhand, but it was another to hold the evidence of those struggles in her own hands. Diana had never been able to fully explain the pain she had endured, the fears she had carried with her for so long. Catherine had heard whispers about Diana's paranoia, about her fears that someone was watching her every move. Catherine had dismissed them as just that, whispers, rumors, the kind of stories that tended to get exaggerated in the tabloids. But now, with the DNA test results in her hands, those fears seemed real, tangible. They weren't just the ravings of a woman scorned by the press. They were signs of something deeper, something more sinister at play. As Catherine continued to read, her mind raced with the implications. What did this mean for William? What did it mean for the royal family? For years, the palace had worked tirelessly to control Diana's legacy. They had painted her as a tragic figure, a woman whose pain was the result of a broken marriage and media cruelty. But now, with the DNA test results in her hands, Catherine began to question everything she had been told. Was Diana's pain truly just the result of her marriage to Charles? Or was there something more? Was there a secret that had been hidden from the public, something too dangerous for the monarchy to confront? The possibility that the monarchy had known about this secret all along sent a chill down Catherine's spine. For years, she had lived under the shadow of Diana's legacy, but she had never imagined that her own life, her own family, could be tied to that legacy in such a profound way. The more she thought about it, the more the pieces began to fit together. The sealed files, the guarded silence, the strange secrecy surrounding the DNA test. It all pointed to something far more personal than Catherine had ever anticipated. But even as the weight of the truth settled in, Catherine tried to dismiss it. She didn't want to believe that the monarchy, the institution she had married into, could be so deceitful. She had been raised to believe in the importance of duty, in the power of the crown, in the idea that the monarchy stood above the chaos of the world. But now, with the DNA test results in front of her, she couldn't ignore the possibility that everything she had been taught was a lie. The monarchy had worked so hard to maintain its image, to protect its reputation, but at what cost? How many lives had been ruined in the pursuit of power? And how many more would be destroyed if the truth ever came to light? The more she thought about it, the more Catherine realized that this wasn't just about the royal family. It wasn't even just about Diana's legacy. This was about truth. About the truth that had been buried for so long, hidden behind walls of secrecy and deception. Catherine was holding the key to that truth, but she wasn't sure if she was ready to unlock it. Her mind kept drifting back to Diana's words, the things William had shared with her about his mother's last years. Diana had spoken of her fears, of the things she had kept locked away in her heart. Catherine had dismissed them as paranoia, as the emotional outpourings of a woman who had been betrayed by everyone around her. But now, with the DNA test in her hands, Catherine saw those fears in a new light. They weren't just emotional cries for help. They were warnings. Warnings about a truth that had been hidden from the public. And now, Catherine was the one who held that truth in her hands. The days that followed were filled with a growing sense of unease. Catherine couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. She found herself walking the palace halls, lost in thought, trying to come to terms with the gravity of the situation. Every room she passed seemed to echo with the ghosts of the past, with the memories of a woman who had been silenced, whose story had been rewritten by those in power. Catherine felt the weight of that silence pressing down on her, and she realized that she couldn't remain silent any longer. But as the realization settled in, Catherine also knew that revealing the truth would come at a great cost. The monarchy had always been built on silence, on the idea that duty and tradition were more important than personal feelings. But now she understood that silence had come at the expense of truth. It had come at the expense of Diana's memory, and it had come at the expense of her own peace of mind. Catherine knew that if she revealed what she had learned, everything would change. The monarchy would be forced to confront the truth, to face the consequences of the secrets it had kept hidden for so long. And yet, despite the fear, the uncertainty, and the pain, Catherine felt a deep sense of resolve. She could no longer remain a passive participant in the royal family's narrative. The truth, she realized, had to come out. It was the only way to honor Diana's memory and to ensure that her story was finally told in all its complexity and pain. As she sat in the quiet of the palace, with the DNA test results still fresh in her mind, Catherine made a vow to herself. She would not let Diana's truth be buried again. No matter the cost, she would make sure that the secrets of the past were finally revealed. The walls that had been built to protect the monarchy would no longer be enough to shield it from the truth. And when the time came, Catherine would be ready to face whatever consequences came with it. As the weight of the truth began to settle over Catherine, the reality of her situation grew ever more apparent. What had once seemed like a personal matter, a quiet medical test tucked away in the royal routine, had now exploded into something far bigger than she could have imagined. This was no longer just about her or even Diana. It was about the very foundation of the monarchy itself. Catherine knew that if she revealed the results of the DNA test, it would shatter the carefully constructed image that the royal family had worked so hard to maintain. But she also knew that silence could no longer be an option. The palace was now under a cloud of suspicion. Whispers of the DNA test began to circulate, carried not by officials but by the palace staff who were privy to information they should never have had. Some claimed the test was never intended for Catherine at all, but rather to confirm something far more significant, something linked to Diana's bloodline. The idea that the monarchy had been hiding this truth for years now seemed more than plausible. And the secrecy surrounding the test, the sealed files, the guarded silence, all of it pointed to something much more sinister. Catherine was no stranger to the pressures of being a part of the royal family. She had learned early on that public appearances, the carefully crafted smiles, and the endless expectations were part of the price she paid for being a member of the House of Windsor. But this was different. This wasn't a moment of public scrutiny. This was a reckoning with history, a confrontation with the truth that had been buried for far too long. Behind the scenes, the palace advisors scrambled, attempting to control the narrative, to contain the emerging scandal that threatened to shake the monarchy to its core. They knew the significance of the DNA results. They understood that if the truth came out, it could expose everything the palace had tried to suppress. The whispers about the monarchy's handling of Diana's legacy, the rumors about her secret struggles, were no longer just rumors. They were facts, and those facts were now in Catherine's hands. At first, the advisors tried to appeal to Catherine's sense of duty. They pleaded with her to keep the test results hidden, to stay silent for the sake of the monarchy. The arguments were framed as concerns for her children, for the future of the crown. They warned her that revealing the truth could destroy everything the royal family had fought to protect. But Catherine was no longer swayed by these empty appeals. She could hear the desperation in their voices, the fear that this truth would bring down everything they had worked to preserve. They weren't worried about the monarchy's survival. They were worried about their own positions, their own power. As the days passed, Catherine felt the pressure intensify. She could feel the walls of the palace closing in around her, the whispers growing louder with each passing hour. The royal advisors were relentless in their pursuit of silence, telling her that revealing the results would only cause chaos, that it would weaken the monarchy beyond repair. They tried to make her feel guilty, as though the weight of this decision was hers alone to carry. But Catherine was resolute. She couldn't allow herself to become another silent participant in the royal family's cover-up. She had made a vow to herself, and she knew that revealing the truth was the only way to honor Diana's memory. In the midst of this turmoil, William found himself torn between his loyalty to the crown and his loyalty to Catherine. He had always known that his position as heir to the throne would come with its share of compromises, but this was something entirely different. His love for his mother, his memories of her, were now in direct conflict with the institution he had been raised to uphold. The palace expected him to remain silent, to protect the monarchy's image, to do whatever it took to prevent the truth from coming out. But William couldn't turn his back on the woman he had loved, on the woman who had been betrayed by the very people who now demanded his loyalty. For days, he struggled with his emotions. He wanted to protect Catherine, to shield her from the pressure that was closing in around her. But he also knew that the truth could no longer be ignored. The monarchy had built its foundation on silence, on secrecy, and on control. Now that foundation was beginning to crack, and William could feel the weight of it pressing down on him. Catherine was not the only one being hunted. The palace advisors circled, watching her every move, trying to anticipate what she might do next. They knew that if she revealed the results, the monarchy would be forced to confront the truth, to face the consequences of their actions. The more Catherine resisted, the more desperate they became. They knew that if she acted on her own, it could change everything. But Catherine was not intimidated. She had made her decision, and there was no turning back. The time for silence had passed. One evening, in the midst of the growing tension, Catherine found herself alone with the envelope. It had been days since she had first read the results, but the weight of them still hung heavily in the air. She had thought about telling William, about sharing the truth with him, but she had hesitated. She knew that the revelation would shatter him, that it would force him to confront everything he had been taught to believe. But she also knew that William deserved to know the truth, just as Diana had deserved to speak it. When Catherine finally shared the results with him, she watched as the color drained from his face. His eyes, once filled with hope and confidence, were now clouded with disbelief and confusion. He pushed the envelope away from him, as though distance alone could erase the contents inside. For a moment, William refused to believe what he had just read. His instinct was to deny it, to push it aside as though it were just another rumor, another lie designed to tear the family apart. But the evidence, the cold, irrefutable facts, were right in front of him. He couldn't escape it. The pain in William's eyes was evident as he stared at the results, his mind struggling to process the enormity of the situation. He had always known that his mother had suffered, that she had been treated unfairly by the palace and the press. But this was different. This was something far deeper, far more dangerous than anything he had imagined. The DNA test results confirmed the unthinkable. Diana had hidden a secret so powerful that it had the potential to destroy everything the monarchy had worked to build. William's anger flared as he read the report, his hands shaking with the weight of the revelation. But as the anger subsided, it was replaced with grief. He saw his mother again, alone in those final years, fighting battles that no one had ever seen, carrying a secret that had been too dangerous to voice. The truth that Catherine had uncovered was not just a scandal. It was a betrayal that had haunted Diana throughout her life. For William, the revelation was a turning point. He could no longer remain silent, no longer pretend that everything was as it seemed. The monarchy had betrayed his mother, and now it had betrayed him. He could feel the walls around him closing in, the weight of history pressing down on him as he faced the truth. The institution he had been raised to protect, the crown he had been taught to cherish, had been built on lies, and now he was left to pick up the pieces. The questions began to flood his mind. Had Diana's death been the result of something more than a tragic accident? Had the monarchy known the truth all along? And had they silenced her to protect themselves? Was this the secret that had led to her downfall? The one she had been forced to carry alone? William couldn't shake the thought that his mother's death had been the final act in a long history of betrayal. And now, he had to decide whether he would continue the legacy of silence or expose the truth for the world to see. Catherine watched as William struggled with the weight of the truth, his grief raw and uncontained. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that the revelations they had uncovered would change everything. But she also knew that there was no going back. The truth had been revealed, and it could not be hidden again. As the storm of revelations began to swirl around the palace, Catherine and William knew they were facing a turning point that could not be undone. Every step they took from that moment forward would ripple through the monarchy, forever altering its course. The secret, once buried under years of silence, was now exposed, and there was no turning back. Catherine could feel the weight of history pressing down on her, pushing her toward a decision that would not just affect her life, but the lives of those closest to her and the future of the royal family itself. The DNA test results had already changed everything. The monarchy's carefully crafted image of unity, tradition, and duty had been shattered. The truth about Diana's hidden past, her secret struggles, and the powerful legacy she had left behind had come to light. And now, Catherine and William found themselves at the center of a storm, one that threatened to consume everything in its path. But the battle was far from over. As the news of the DNA results spread, the palace's deepest fears began to materialize. The advisors, once so confident in their ability to control the royal narrative, were now scrambling to contain the fallout. The monarchy had weathered many storms before, but this felt different. The truth was out, and it had the potential to destroy the very institution they had spent centuries building. For Catherine, the pressure was overwhelming. She had always known that being part of the royal family meant living in the public eye. But this was something entirely different. This wasn't just about maintaining a facade for the press. This was about the very foundation of the monarchy itself. The revelations had rocked the palace to its core, and now everyone was on edge, desperate to keep the truth from spilling further into the public domain. But no matter how hard the palace tried to suppress the truth, it had already begun to spread. Whispers had turned into full-blown rumors, and those rumors were spreading like wildfire across the media. The press, once so eager to report on every royal misstep, now had a new, even more explosive story to latch onto. Headlines screamed with questions about the DNA test, about Diana's hidden truth, and about the monarchy's role in keeping it all buried. As the media frenzy grew, Catherine and William knew they had to act. The palace's usual tactics of secrecy and control were no longer enough. This was a moment of reckoning, and the truth could no longer be hidden behind closed doors. The more they tried to contain the revelations, the more they realized that they were fighting a losing battle. But there was another layer to this battle, one that Catherine hadn't fully anticipated. As the media began to piece together the fragments of the story, they started to focus not just on Diana's hidden truth, but on the royal family's role in keeping it buried. The monarchy, which had always prided itself on maintaining control over its image, was now under scrutiny like never before. The world wanted answers, and the palace could no longer keep the lid on the truth. In the midst of this chaos, Catherine was faced with a difficult choice. Should she remain silent, as the palace had always expected, and allow the monarchy to weather the storm? Or should she take a stand, revealing the truth once and for all, no matter the consequences? She had spent years trying to navigate the complex world of royal duty, but this was different. This wasn't just about duty. It was about family, truth, and the legacy of the woman who had shaped her life in ways she couldn't have imagined. The pressure weighed heavily on William as well. He had always been aware of the scrutiny that came with his position as heir to the throne, but the events unfolding now were unlike anything he had faced before. His mother's legacy, once defined by public adoration and private sorrow, was now being exposed in ways he hadn't anticipated. And with it came the realization that his entire understanding of his family's history, his own identity, was built on a foundation of lies. William had always tried to do what was best for the monarchy, but now he was forced to confront the truth that had been hidden for so long. His love for his mother, his admiration for her strength and resilience, had always been tempered by the knowledge that she had been silenced, her story rewritten to fit the palace's narrative. But now, with the truth laid bare, William couldn't ignore the gravity of the situation. The monarchy had chosen silence over truth, and that silence had cost Diana everything. In the midst of the turmoil, Catherine and William found themselves at a crossroads. They had always been bound by duty, by the expectations placed upon them as members of the royal family. But now, with the weight of the truth pressing down on them, they had to decide what kind of legacy they wanted to leave behind. Should they continue the tradition of silence, of hiding the truth for the sake of preserving the monarchy? Or should they stand up for what was right, for what Diana had never been able to stand up for in life? The tension within the palace reached a boiling point. Catherine, once so careful to toe the line between her personal beliefs and royal duty, now found herself fighting for something far more important. This was no longer just about protecting the monarchy. It was about protecting the truth. And the truth, no matter how painful or destructive, could no longer be ignored. As the media storm raged on, Catherine and William made a decision that would change everything. They could no longer stay silent. The truth had to be told, no matter the cost. The monarchy had spent years building walls to protect its image, to control the narrative, but those walls were crumbling. The public was demanding answers, and Catherine and William knew that the only way to move forward was to face the truth head-on. The moment they chose to speak out, the royal family was thrust into the spotlight like never before. The DNA test results, once a carefully guarded secret, were now public knowledge. The truth about Diana's hidden legacy, her pain, and her sacrifice had been exposed to the world. And as the world watched, Catherine and William stood firm in their commitment to honor their mother's memory, to ensure that the truth would never again be buried beneath the weight of silence. But as the dust settled, they realized that the battle was far from over. The monarchy, once untouchable in its power and prestige, was now facing a reckoning that would test its very foundation. The truth had been revealed, but what came next was uncertain. The monarchy would never be the same again. The world was watching, waiting to see if the royal family could survive the fallout from the secrets it had kept hidden for so long. For Catherine and William, the truth was no longer something to be feared. It was a burden they had chosen to carry, a legacy they had decided to protect. They had faced the ghosts of the past, and in doing so, they had ensured that Diana's voice would never be silenced again. The monarchy had been shaken, its walls cracked open, but in that moment of truth, something remarkable had happened. The royal family, once a symbol of control and tradition, had become something new. It was no longer just an institution that existed for the sake of power. It was a family, bound together by the truth, by the courage to face the past, and by the determination to ensure that the truth would never be hidden again.